Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our last session of Teen Summit today. My name is Kim Poe. I am the Children and Young Adult Consultant in the third tiniest state in the Union, Connecticut. Welcome, everyone, for joining us. I hope you've had a great Teen Summit today and you've heard and received some really amazing information. I am going to quickly turn the show over to Alyssa, who's going to be telling us about strategic teen services for middle schoolers. Thank you so much, Alyssa, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kim. And thank you all for being here today to talk about middle schoolers, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I'm pretty informal, so if at any point you want to interrupt me with questions, go for it. Because I can yap with the best of them. All right, so this is strategic teen services for middle schoolers. And hold on. That's me. So my name is Alyssa Taft. I'm the teen librarian at Cranston Public Libraries in Cranston, Rhode Island. We are a 6-branch system, which is, probably, I don't know, average for other places, but for Rhode Island, that's pretty big. And so I coordinate teen services for all of our branches. I am a former middle school librarian, which I feel like is part of why middle school is my absolute jam. Love all teens of all ages, but middle school, I definitely think is a place where we just need to put a little bit of extra love sometimes. All right, so our agenda is we're going to talk about why do I care about middle school? Why did, we picked this as a topic to talk about? We're going to talk about connecting directly with schools. We're going to talk about middle school volunteers, collections for middle schoolers, and then some next steps that you might be interested in taking if you are looking to revamp, strengthen, analyze the services that you provide specifically for middle schoolers. So why middle school? So in Cranston, we consider teen services to be grades 6 to 12. That's going to be a little bit different in every location. But for us, all of our public middle schools, we have 4 of them in Cranston, are grades 6 to 8. And so that is almost half of our teen population. If we're looking at the city of Cranston and grades 6 to 12, half of our teens are middle schoolers. And so I think that, if we think about teens, a lot of times people think of high school aged kids, but in terms of the public library, we definitely start younger than high school age kids. And so I think it's important to remember that like our youngins are still part of teen. And they have more free time than their high school counterparts. I think our high schoolers, especially now, are so busy, scheduled, have so much on their plate, have so much going on. And they just don't have as much free time as our middle schoolers. So oftentimes, at least in our library system, the people that are coming to our library for teen stuff that have the like social and mental capacity and the capacity in their schedules are our middle schoolers. And what's awesome is that I feel like as a whole, they're pretty enthusiastic. Some of them act like they're jaded and 40, but like on the whole, I feel like they're a little bit more enthusiastic and a little less jaded than maybe our high school counterparts. They want to be involved, they want to do stuff, they want to feel grown up. That is like just such a I think a visceral memory that some of us have being in middle school is like, oh, you're just like so ready to grow up and be treated like not a baby anymore. And they're still pretty impressionable. And what I mean by that is I think it's pretty easy to still show them that there are people that are doing good work and their community can be a really beautiful place. And they respond really well to being treated as valuable individuals. So again, that feeling of like, you have something to contribute, you are valuable, you are not a child anymore, you are becoming a young adult. Even if there are definitely places in their lives where they still might be treated like children, the library is a place that can treat them, with a little bit more maturity and a little bit more value placed on them as individual people. And I just think they're very thoughtful, creative, and they have a lot to offer the library, and maybe sometimes get overlooked in sort of our larger conversation of children's versus teens. Where do these sort of kids that are maybe technically a part of one section or another in your library, but are maybe sort of lost in the shuffle, um, in that sort of transition from children's to teen services? All right, so I feel like part of the reason why we have a lot of middle schoolers and a lot of teen involvement at Cranston is that we have an absolutely incredible relationship with our public schools. And I can take like no credit for that. The scaffolding was there when I got there almost 7 years ago. We just have a really great relationship with our school librarians. Um, and I think that is key. And that is so tough. I think sometimes if you are in a situation where maybe there's only one middle and one high school, which means if you're not connecting with those two school librarians, you're kind of out of luck. I'm very lucky. We have 4 public middle schools and 2 public high schools, along with tons of other educational opportunities in Cranston. Um, but I do think that it is worth investing the time and effort in trying to connect with your schools because it is one of those things that I think is just worth the return on investment. So if you're going to put your energy into something, doing outreach directly to your schools is 100% worth it. And I think because I have a school librarian background, I get the specific challenges that can come with trying to invite people from the outside into your school. It's not always easy. It can be dependent upon the principal that year. Some principals are all about community coming into the schools, and some just really don't like it and make it really difficult. There have been times where I've had to, cancel a school visit because all of a sudden there's a faculty meeting in the library after school that no one put on the library calendar. These are just things that like happen in schools. And I think as long as you're flexible and agile and sort of have these things in mind, um, that will make partnering with the schools that much easier. I'm all about starting small and growing. So it's great if you can provide the same level of outreach to every school in your town or city. But if there is like one class, one club, one school librarian that you can start small and connect with, I think that's so worth it. I think having the sort of like all or nothing mentality can sort of keep you from piloting programs that might have the opportunity to grow later on. We also do a very targeted approach to outreach. I'll talk about like that more in a second. But again, I don't think that it has to be a one size fits all. It doesn't have to be the same every single year. I think that you can be really fluid and really responsive when it comes to your outreach with your schools. And if you absolutely can't get into a school, we all had this experience during COVID. There are lots of other ways to provide printed or virtual promotional materials. I've done videos, even if it's just like a really quick 1-minute commercial about teen services that the school librarians can play during their library orientation that they do with, their freshmen or their sixth graders. We also just send a lot of printed things. We do Friday flyers through the schools. So I think just any way that you can get into the school is a great start. Specifically for middle schoolers, I focus really strongly on our sixth grade visits. So in the fall, I do my absolute best to get into all 4 middle schools and do a presentation for every sixth grader. This year we got to, I think, every group except one team in one school. So we're missing maybe like 200 kids, but this year we were able to talk to 705 kids about the library. And I gave 25 presentations. And the reason that we do this in the fall of sixth grade is because that is when they've really leveled up into teen services. So even if they've been coming to one of their public libraries, there now have different things that are offered to them. And we want to make sure that they know that like they are a part of teen. You are still welcome in children's spaces. You are still welcome to children's collections, but there are new opportunities for you in the library. And we want to be excited to sort of welcome you to teen services at the public library. During these presentations, we talk about volunteering at the library programs, books and materials. I schedule these visits again through the school librarians. It might look different for you in your town, but I, email the 4 middle school librarians all the time. And so I just every fall set these visits up, and it's only a 20-minute presentation, which works out really well. It allows the classes to, if they want to use the second half of the block for instruction or getting library books in the library, that works out really well as a structure. It also, there was one one school where I did back to back. So like half of the sixth graders came the first half, half the sixth graders came the second half. And it was like really, really quick, and I definitely lost my voice, but that 20-minute presentation gives us a lot of flexibility. So it's long enough that I get the information in, but still allows them some time in their day. And I gave them to individual classes, but I also had a couple of classes that wanted to do like their whole team in the auditorium. And I very much am just like, whatever you guys want to do, I'm here. What's important to me is that I get to talk to some sixth graders. We also do a library card drive in the spring. And we don't do it during September, which, is like Library Card Sign Up Month, because September is bonkers for the schools, bonkers for school librarians. There's just no, I wish they would just change it to the spring because I'm just always like, this is the worst time. So we just do a push in the spring and it works out really well. Again, coordinate with those school librarians. We have a special library card application that we send to the schools, and it has this little extra slip of paper on the side that allows them to write their name, their grade, and their homeroom. So once we process the card, we can actually like attach it to the card, give it back to the school librarians, and they can pass them out very easily through the schools. And that allows them to get a library card without having to come into the library. And I think that is especially important for our middle schoolers who maybe can walk to the public library, but maybe don't have someone who can actually bring them to the library, sign them up for a library card. If they're under the age of 13, they need that signature. And so being able to go through the schools, they pass out those applications, they bring them home, they fill it out with their grown up at home, get it signed, and we sort of take care of coordinating, getting the cards processed back to the schools. And I do think that is great for all ages, but specifically for middle schoolers, I think that is a really nice equity piece for those who can go to the library, but maybe don't have a grown up who can take them. And then I just wanted to put a little picture of all these little perler bead keychains that our team volunteers made last year. We did like an incentive thing where if you got a library card or have a library card during this sort of library card push in the spring, you could come to the library and get a little keychain. And so it was a nice little close the loop. And also a fun thing for our team volunteers to feel like they were doing, kind of giving back to their same group of peers. I also do a lot of pre-summer visits, as I feel like a lot of people do. And so because there are so many, so many schools, 6 schools that I have to try and cover, I tend to offer individual presentations to those middle schools. So very similar to the 6th grade visits. Every school is different. Some teachers have space in their curriculum, some don't. So we try to just get to as many as possible and just be really excited about the kids that we can speak to. But I just feel like the individual presentations to middle school is more impactful. Again, they have more time. They have, more space in their lives to do things at the library. So then for the high schools, I tend to offer like a table in the cafeteria. I've done some after school outreach. Because I feel like, especially since we've been doing this consistently, most of our teens, by the time they're in high school, they've seen me, they've heard my spiel, they probably know there's volunteering at the library. So it's nice to have a little reminder. I usually set up a little table outside the cafeteria with candy, and I just yell who needs to finish their community service hours. People come by. I make them take a little picture of my sign, because I'm like, if I give you a piece of paper, you're gonna lose it. Whereas for the middle schoolers, I feel like that sort of one-on-one presentation connection just goes a little bit further, and you only have so much energy and time. We've also done a summer bookmark for middle schoolers that we've given out that has like middle school stuff on it, but then we also will include like some of our all ages programming. And again, not something that we feel is worth the return on investment to print for the high school, but for the middle school, it does feel worth it. And I feel like middle schoolers during the summer are the perfect age to be connected to their library, because many of them feel too old for camp, but are too young for jobs, right? And so they are looking for something that is maybe a little bit different. At our library, we focus very heavily on teen volunteering, which I'll go over more in a second. But I do feel like this is the perfect time to have a space where middle schoolers can come and do things at the library, help serve their community, have a lot of fun, be out of their house, but are not necessarily at a camp feeling like they're being catered to or like a baby in some way. All right, so that was school stuff. I feel like I could just talk about school outreach for an entire hour, so I will refrain. But middle school volunteering. So we have our volunteer program is 6 to 12. So if you are in 6th grade, even if you're 11, you are allowed to volunteer at the library. And that is sort of the big thing that we pitch at our 6th grade visits, is like, this is sort of the leveling up process, is that we now are giving you the opportunity to get involved in a different way than when you were in elementary school. And again, just sort of going back to that first slide, they have more free time than their high school counterparts. They really enjoy feeling older, responsible, mature. Our kids that have been coming to elementary programs have already seen our teen volunteers, have had that modeled for them. And now they get to sort of be the big kids in the room. That's really valuable to a lot of them. And I just feel like it's a developmentally appropriate time to transition from being a part of the library that is receiving services to a part of the library that is like, okay, now you are actually a part of this and you are a valuable member of our team. And I feel like our younger kids, they don't know who's an adult or who's a teen or who's a high school versus middle schooler most of the time. They just see older people, older kids at the library, and they're just so excited to talk to them, idolize them. And I think that is just such a beautiful and intergenerational connection. I also think volunteering is a very safe place to practice skills. So, yeah, we've got some ratchet middle schoolers that come in totally like off the wall and you can't get them to like focus on a task. But this is a safe place to do that. Like this is a place where they can work on those skills, where they can work on their focus, work on being a part of a team. And so we absolutely do still do some like just for fun programs for teens, but what we have found just sort of following the data and following what works is that our middle schoolers by and large want to have a seat at the table and want to be in the library doing something that is meaningful. And so I did link a document that my library uses that we created, which is best practices for hosting teen volunteers, especially considering that like I'm not always the one that is going to be in the room with the teen volunteers. A lot of times it is a children's librarian running a children's program or doing program prep for their own program. And so this was a sort of guiding document that we made to make sure that everyone on our team is on the same page when it comes to requesting teen volunteers and how we want to treat all of our teen volunteers in the library. And so I pulled out one section that I think is particularly relevant to our middle schoolers, which is a section called Developmentally Appropriate Teen Behaviors That May Be Baffling to Adults. And so this is a section that we have in our document that I just think is important to remind people that like teenagers, but especially our middle schoolers, are going to do things that seem bonkers to us, but are actually totally developmentally appropriate for middle schoolers as their brains are developing, as their social skills are developing. So just some examples of totally appropriate teen behaviors that are baffling to adults. Being unaware that their conversations can be overheard in a public space. Forgetting to do later steps in a multi-step sequence. I think we've all had that experience. They do step 1 and 2 and then just stop. Needing to be told something multiple times or in a different way. I'm really guilty of that, of just sort of like, blah, 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 and then them sort of giving me the dead eye stare. And I'm like, oh, no, that was on me because I didn't explain it right. Not speaking up if they're confused or unsure what to do. Being extremely quiet or reserved, especially at the beginning of a program or their first time volunteering, making choices without thinking through the consequences, trouble with like volume, sitting still, not touching things. That one is huge. The like not being able to not touch things or like, tap the sign in, when they go through like a doorway, that sort of stuff. And then being asked to stop something and then having to tell them over and over again, like, I already told you that you need to stop this behavior. And so obviously there are things that are like truly disruptive or even dangerous that you need to like completely nip in the bud. But these are things that I think that like people maybe who are less experienced with middle schoolers or less comfortable with middle schoolers might be like, oh my God, they're doing it at me. And it's like, nah, they're not doing it at you. This is just the types of things that we have to work on and the types of things that are totally normal. And we can still have them in the library and we can still do really great work, especially if we are aware of these types of things, as professionals that work with children and teens. I'm gonna pause and take a sip of water. Okay. Okay, so middle school volunteers. So I said before that we don't do a ton of what I consider just for fun programs at our library for for teens for grades 6 to 12. We do some, but we just found that we were serving our teens better by really leaning into volunteering. So I just ran the numbers for our annual report. And so from um, July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2025, we had 380 teen volunteers and they earned about 3,200 volunteer hours with us. And so if you tried to break those numbers down into like program numbers, like, oh, if X amount of teens came to our library for this amount of hours, that would be really impressive programming data. And we would never get those numbers if we were doing programs that were just for fun programs at the library. But they show up to volunteer. And so part of our sort of philosophy is that we're still doing programs, they're just a little sneakier. And this is especially true for our middle school volunteers. So if we're doing a slime program for elementary school, middle schoolers love to make slime. They will not show up to the library for a slime program for teens. But I can guarantee you that every single slot for volunteering for the slime program will be filled. And when we tell them that they get to make their own slime at the end of the program because we have budgeted enough materials for them, they will be totally stoked. And so that is a way that we sort of still allow them to do fun stuff at the library through volunteering, because they're just not in our community, at least they're just not showing up if there is not that sort of extra incentive to volunteer. But they still really love doing the activities, eating the snacks, doing all these fun things at the library, coloring bookmarks, decorating the bulletin board, making holiday cards for the senior center. And so we just had to sort of rethink how we are viewing programming for this age group. Another example, we did a humongous K-pop Demon Hunters party with 84 people. It was bonkers. It was so much fun. And we had spots for 10 teen volunteers, and every spot got filled. They dressed up, they came to play. They were just like so ready. And so like clearly they would have loved a K-pop Demon Hunters program, but if it wasn't volunteering, like I don't know if we would have gotten 10 teens specifically for a teen K-pop Demon Hunters program. But they really showed up to volunteer at one, and they got to make friendship bracelets and eat ramen and sing along. And so just another example where we're sort of like sneaking the fun programs into our teen volunteer program. We also do a big end of summer thank you party for our teen volunteers. And again, just I think by virtue of they have more free time, they're still a little bit more enthusiastic, a little less jaded. That tends to be more of our middle school volunteers come to that. And we have snacks, it's after hours in our main branch. So it's just us in the library, which is so much fun. And again, things that this volunteer program allows us to sort of do these types of fun activities with our middle schoolers in a way that I just feel they have historically not shown up outside of this program that we have built. All right, switching gears to middle school collections. Just sort of going with the theme of like middle schoolers have more time. So at least in Cranston, middle schoolers just have more free time to read. That is just true of their lives. They just have more free time to read. In Cranston, they have more free choice reading built into their curriculum than our high school students. And so our high school students use this absolutely horrendous program called Study Sync, and they're constantly reading like excerpts of things and snippets of work. And even my like power readers will like come check a book out and they're like, I don't even know if I'll have time to read this because there's so much Study Sync work to do. And I'm like, oh, that breaks my heart. But so yeah, just the reality is they just don't have as much free time, both in school and out of school for free choice reading. Versus our middle schools, there are some of our middle schools where like you're expected to have a independent reading book on you at all times. And like if like you get stopped in the hallway and you don't have it, that's a big deal. So I think that focusing on like your middle school population and your middle school collection is so important because they are just sort of your teen demographic that is able to read more and access your resources more. So if they're the teen population that is coming in wanting readers advisory, wanting free reading books, wanting books for pleasure, you want to make it easy for them to find their books, and that can be really challenging when they are in between your children's and your teen collections. And so the way that we have remedied that um, is we have middle school books in both children's and teen, and we select very purposefully for middle schoolers of all types. And so what I mean by that is we are collectively as a youth services team talking about like, okay, do we have books for reluctant readers? Do we have books for super readers? Do we have books for the seventh grade boy that's really into soccer? Like, is he going to look at our teen collection and say, this is not for me? And so sort of running those scenarios and making sure that we are collecting for all different types of middle schoolers that come into our library. We also have a high-low teen collection that includes middle school and high school books. And I think, again, that's a really important thing for our population of, excuse me, our population of readers who are maybe still working on those reading skills. If you have a sixth grader with a third grade reading level, they do not want to read Owl Diaries. So having something that has a middle school story or a teen story, I just think is really really valuable. And then before I kind of get into our specific collection criteria, there's the whole like to tween or not to tween question. And so when I started sort of thinking about our middle school problem, our issue of like, where are our middle school books? How are we making these accessible? I talked to a lot of Rhode Island teen librarians and I was like, who has a tween collection? Tell me about your tween collection. What is it like to purchase for it? And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a tween collection, but for us, having multiple locations, multiple selectors, having a collaborative selection process, we already are doing a lot of work to decide, okay, what is J versus teen versus adult? And so that added another spot where we had to make choices between children's tween, tween teen, teen adult. And then it felt granular to a point where it wasn't helpful anymore for us. I think if you had a children's and teen space that was maybe like all one space and you have this sort of natural gradient, a tween collection could be really helpful. But for us, it felt like we were just sort of siloing books off. And we just were not confident that we could make a tween collection that was going to solve the problems that we were looking for.
Can I jump in, Alyssa,
Yeah.
and ask a clarifying question about that?
Yep.
We've some really great things going on in the chat. So someone asked, they said to clarify, middle school books in both children or teen and children's, right? Do you have one copy of a book in both sections, or do you pick and choose which like middle school book that you are targeting and deciding like where it goes in kids or teen? Like we're looking for clarification there.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So I'm going to go through the criteria to show how we make those decisions. But yes, we decide. We have a very not complex, but we have like a system for deciding if something is J versus teen. And so we use the criteria to decide if a book is going to go in one place or the other. And so as we all know from, if you select, there is a pretty strong divide in publishing between middle grade and YA. But there are books for middle schoolers sort of in that area. And so I was finding that most of our middle grade books, even if it was like about an eighth grader going through it and had a great teen cover, was going in children's. And I was like, I feel like we are just not capturing those books in a really thoughtful and strategic way. And so yes, we make that decision, one or the other. Which often leads to, I have books in my teen collection that every other library in the state of Rhode Island has in children's. And I'm just like, well, that's what we do here. Was there another question or should I go on to criteria?
No, go on. I'm pulling some to save for the end, but because someone was looking for clarity, I figured that
Yes.
was one to squeeze in there for. I'm interested in the curriculum. Go, please.
Perfect. Okay, so these were criteria that we created at my library. There's a link to the actual document for just sort of ease of reading, but I did break it down for us in 2 slides so it's easier to read. Excuse me. So, middle school collection. Items under consideration for the teen collection should be published and marketed towards middle schoolers or high schoolers, which sort of weeds out things that sometimes people are like, oh, but this is about a 12-year-old. And I'm like, yeah, but it's literary fiction for an adult. So that is very different. So that is just sort of step one. Step two, have a protagonist that is 13 or older or 12 but in seventh grade. And there's an asterisk there because I will go over sort of exceptions in a second. But that is sort of our first test is like, is this protagonist 13 or in seventh grade? Um, and by and large, most of the time, those books will go in teen. And that does mean that we just have some variation between teen and children's, especially in terms of like content. But we really do feel that like we want our middle schoolers to walk into teen and see books that are for them. We want the story to have, a plot that takes place in seventh to 12th grade. And we want those middle school books to be developmentally appropriate stories for middle schoolers and high schoolers. So when we're thinking about those like on the cusp books between J and teen, we're thinking about like first crushes, first relationships, friendship drama that is not easily navigated or solved, identity development or awareness, and seeing yourself as an individual outside the context of your own family. And so this allows us to really look at like, okay, we have a a plucky adventure story about a 13-year-old who goes on an adventure with a talking dog and like everything works out in the end. That's something that we might be like, they're 13, but this story could be about an 8-year-old and it would change absolutely nothing. That would be one that maybe we would be like, this is more of a children's book. But if it is a seventh grader who has a first crush, is dealing with some really big developmental changes, the types of things that our middle schoolers are going through or their friends are going through. Those are the books that we really want to prioritize putting into our middle school collection in teen, which is, I don't know if I made this clear. Our middle school collection is interfiled. We just have teen. We have teen books for middle schoolers, high schoolers, all in one spot. So exceptions to this criteria include books with reviews and marketing that prioritize elementary age interests, which we consider grade 6 and under. They may go in children's, even if the protagonist is a teen. So Diary of a Kid's a great example. I think he's actually in 6th grade, so like, but you know, he's in middle school, and there's a lot of books that start out with the transition to middle school. They're in 6th grade, but they really are for a younger reader. And so we still keep those books in children's, and they're pretty easy to spot. A lot of times they have reviews that are like grades 3 to 6. And we're like, yeah, even though like maybe it's the summer before 7th grade, this is so clearly for an elementary audience. On the flip side, for high schoolers, books featuring protagonists over the age of 18 that are published and marketed for a teen audience may go in the teen collection, even if they're over 18. And that really captures all of those books that are written for like their freshmen in college type books that are like still very much for a YA teen audience. Um, and so that's the criteria we use. Not a perfect science, collection development never is, but we find that that really allows us to make almost like an algorithm for making those decisions. And so we're not just making a decision based on the cover. We're not just making a decision based on the author, the length of the book, the marketing. We really are looking at the reviews, the protagonist, the story, and kind of with all of those things, plugging it into the algorithm and deciding if it goes in J or teen. But then we also have these shared understandings about the teen collection that I think help make those decisions feel a little bit better, because it was kind of I don't want to say a tough transition, but it was a transition for our staff to sort of think about middle school books in the teen collection rather than it just being like YA books in our teen collection. So number one, the teen collection serves a diverse population of teens, and books within it should reflect that diversity. Shouldn't be a controversial statement. Um, there will be books for middle schoolers in both teen and J collections all the time. We call it the book smorgasbord. I am pulling a stack of books for a kid, and it will have both teen books and J books in that stack. And I think that's great because I think books and readers do not necessarily fall into these two neat silos of children and teen, right? So we are just okay with the fact that like some kids might need to bounce back and forth for a while, and that's totally fine. So while the teen collection serves a wide range of ages, reading levels, and maturity levels, teens have freedom to read. Teens will largely self-select books that are appropriate for them and stop reading books that are not right for them. And so I've been asked before, like how are you comfortable with having a middle grade book next to a very like mature YA story? And at the end of the day, I feel that we provide really good service, we provide really good readers advisory. But at the end of the day, teens have freedom to read. And if they select a book that's not for them, I do feel that by and large, they will stop reading that book if they are uncomfortable and it is not for them. And then at the end of the day, um, I was a teen that was reading out of the adult section. Like those are decisions that have to be made at the parental level. And so we try to provide as much guidance, and as much customer service as possible to match kids with the books that are right for them. But I do not think that having middle school books in my teen section um is in any way a bad thing or doing a disservice. If anything, it is providing a more cohesive collection for our middle schoolers. Um, Teens should have access to readers advisory tools that help them select books that are right for them. So we're talking book lists, database displays, librarians. We have the Rhode Island Middle School Book Award books and the Teen Book Award books displayed in our teen sections or near our teen sections in our locations. And the Middle School Book Award, I think, is important because about half of those books will eventually go back and live in J, but we display them in teen as a cohesive collection for the reading season. And again, just things that tell middle schoolers when they walk into the library that this is a place for them. This is where their books live. They're still welcome to use the children's room. I will pull children's books for them all the time. But this is the place that is for you. Finally, our teen collection should include fiction, popular nonfiction, graphic novels. Um, Popular nonfiction is definitely a transformation that we have gone through. And this is largely just due to changes in the way that teens research, do homework, access information. And so we really do believe that if teens are looking for nonfiction titles to complete research or schoolwork, there are titles that are relevant to their needs in both adult and children's, kind of depending upon what they're looking for, right? And I just have a lot less kids coming in needing nonfiction books for research. And so we really have pared our nonfiction down to a popular circulating collection in teen, and really just knowing that there's stuff in other parts of our library, online, in their school libraries, that they have access to that sort of fill that void. And they weren't going out anyway. So lots of reasons to make that shift. Okay. I want to make sure we have time for questions, but really quickly, I want to kind of go through what are things that you can maybe start doing to think about services for middle schoolers. And so I think the first thing that you can do is just do an audit of your middle school services. And so these are just some questions that you can sort of think about. And the first one is, what sort of experience do middle schoolers have when they come to your library? And that even like walking through the front door and just putting yourself in the mind of a middle schooler, what do they see? Who are the first people that they talk to? Where visually looks like it might be a place for them? Is everyone friendly? Is everyone pro middle school? Do we need to maybe do a little bit more training or resources, which actually is my next question. So like, are people going on your staff going to be treating middle schoolers and teenagers in general as valuable members of our library community? Or are they leaning into maybe being afraid of teenagers? I feel like people all the time tell me they're afraid of teenagers, and I'm like, why? They're awesome and they're babies. Um, can middle schoolers easily identify where in the library they belong? Can they locate their books and materials? If you are running programs for middle schoolers, which ones are really popular? Which ones aren't really popular? Do you provide volunteer opportunities for middle schoolers? I know that like every library is different. If you ever have volunteering questions, please, put my email at the end of this. I would love to chat about volunteering. There's other topic that I can yap about all day. But if you have like a teen volunteer program that is primarily for high schoolers, maybe think about like why don't you open up to middle schoolers? What are the sort of challenges that you think that would create for you and your staff? And then what sort of relationship do you have with your school librarians, your schools, and what are some ways that you could kind of like establish, grow, or strengthen that relationship with the caveat that like that is always changing. School cultures are always changing. Um, Principles in general move around a lot. And so what is not possible one year might be possible another year. And then finally, I just want to encourage you to start small and grow. So really identifying those people, both internally to your organization and externally, who can support targeted services to middle schoolers. Um, and like for us, the schools are a big one, but we also go to the YMCA. We also have relationships with summer camps, parks and recreation. And we do really try to go where the middle schoolers are. So, if they aren't coming to your library, they are somewhere in your community. Is there an opportunity for you to bring the library to them? Um, Analyzing collection data to see if adjustments need to be made around that J-teen divide. Maybe they don't. Maybe the way that it works in your library is great and you feel very confident that middle schoolers can find their books. If you're not, just think about it. And then thinking just beyond just for fun programs, what are meaningful opportunities that we can provide to our middle schoolers for connection, for growth, to work on those skills, to work on their social emotional connections. Um, and I will say, like, our babysitting program that we run through like the Lifespan Healthcare Network every year, that is something specifically for middle schoolers that always sells out. So I definitely feel like they love fun stuff, but the things that they show up for consistently and that we get the best feedback on are things where they feel like they are truly being seen as like someone who is an individual, they are valuable, and they are not babies in the library. They are leveling up to something new and exciting. So I yapped a lot.
So many questions. People have people want to hear all about you. So I have been pulling them and we're gonna just hit them one by one. Is there an outline for the presentation that you give to schools?
Yeah, I can definitely share that. But mostly I just start with talking about our locations, and then I just go through volunteering, programs, talking about books, where can they find me, how to get a library card. So I can definitely share that. Maybe I'll add a slide before I send this to the tote bag. But yeah, it really is just sort of like, what are the things that I need them to know about the library in 20
Mhm.
minutes?
Beautiful. Can you share the school version of the card application that you mentioned?
Yes, I won't be able to do that today because it is on my work computer at work, but I definitely can. Yeah, I can share that.
Yep, we can add it to the bag later. Like the bag is alive. So once folks have that link, you were able to go in and out. We're not deleting any of this
Cool.
after. So that can come later. That's totally fine. What kind of videos do you send to the schools?
Yeah, so I still think in-person visit is always the best, but if we can't do that, I have literally done like 1 minute commercials about what's going on at the library that have been shown during like um morning announcements. I have done longer videos about the summer reading programs. We have done like weird, wacky summer reading videos that are like barely any information, but it's all of us dressing up in crazy costumes, just to sort of get them talking about the library. So I've done a couple of different things, but typically it's short, and it's mostly like commercial informational.
Love it. Do you have any advice for pushback from other staff about needing to have the middle schoolers come in with their parents to get a library card versus having a take-home form done through the schools?
No, because they still need the signature from the parent. And so if you think about like them being in the school is proof of residency. That's the
Mhm.
big thing for us is like proof of residency. And then It is signed by a parent through the school. So even if a parent came back and was like, that's not my signature, it would kind of be the same process as if like a kid forged their signature on like a
Mhm.
school field trip form. So we've
Yep.
had absolutely no pushback. And getting it through the schools honestly is even sometimes better because I just feel like there's that extra layer of like they know those kids, they know those families, they can actually call a parent if they're like, this signature looks wacky. So yeah, we have not had any issues.
And I've done the same thing. So we did it with our intermediate school. I went into every single classroom. We'd sent the app. We just straight up sent like our library card application in advance, the same way like you're saying they might send home a field trip form. And I went into every class, and while writing out the actual library cards was just sort of like word throwing, and we have this and we have this, and hi, this is who I am. And then we tell them like, here's your card, but don't use it for like 4 days. We gotta put all this stuff in the
Yep.
computer. So yes, I have experience having done the same thing. I'm gonna poll. We had a couple that came in the Q&A button too. Do you invest in passive readers advisory, like posters or displays? Do you all do that as well?
Yeah, we do a lot of displays, and we do a lot of front facing in our teen collection. Um, and so I don't, well, we have a big binder for summer reading every year that I put together. And that is really helpful because in Cranston, I didn't really get into this, but in Cranston, our middle schoolers, are sort of the last holdout of like everyone has the same summer reading assignment and they can read any book that they want and then they have to like answer 3 questions or something. Um, so we have a giant binder for that. And it's all suggested reading because they can read whatever they want. But outside of that, I feel like people don't really read posters or stuff like that. So I feel like there's no substitute to just front facing.
Yeah.
Um, that's typically our biggest sort of marketing
Yeah,
thing.
that makes perfect sense. So here we go. Here's your volunteer question. So, our teens have volunteer requirements for, oops, I'm lying. Our teens have volunteer requirements for their high school that they must do every year. And this library is a large community, which means they get a lot of requests for year-round volunteer signups. I was the same. Any advice on activities that can be given to large groups? Also, as a caveat, they can't allow shelving due to that being a paid position. You're taking away from someone's job. And like a clarity on top of that is that yes, this presentation is focusing on middle school, but this is something that's like a bigger issue for them. So finding things for their volunteers to do in general is a big issue. So do you have any thoughts on that?
So many thoughts. Okay. So number one, I would say our library is the same. I do not let a single person shelve. We have paid shelvers. I'm very firm about that. Um, we do a ton of stuff that like we have them color, but like we print out bookmarks and they color them. We cut them out. We put them on our book sale table. People love them. We have a connection with our senior center every year where we make about 600 to 700 holiday cards that go out in like meal kits. So we are making holiday cards pretty much from September until December at all of our locations. And it's one of those things where like if a kid messes up and makes like a totally ratchet card, someone made like a Family Guy themed card a couple years ago. I just threw it in the trash. They don't know. We have so many cards. Um, we also have a teen review blog. This is something that I started during COVID when we literally had like nothing going on and they still needed community service requirements because same thing in our city. And so I have an article that I can put that I wrote for computers and libraries that outlines how I set up my teen review blog. So I can put that in the tote bag as well if you want to kind of see that. That is huge because I feel like that is so they can do it from home. It's so passive. But then also I will say those reviews are so helpful to me to see what they're actually reading and playing and like what are the sort of themes that I'm seeing and the things that they're engaging with. And then also sometimes they'll review the books they read for school and oh my God, those reviews are hilarious. Um, yeah, so I feel like finding things that have low stakes but high output, so bookmarks, cards, decorating,
Shelf talkers.
yeah, shelf talkers, decorating windows. We have them like we made the perler bead keychains, making buttons or prizes if you're doing a scavenger hunt. Um, there was another one I was gonna say and I totally forgot. Anyways, blah blah blah. So like things that are high output but low stakes, I think are always a really good one. I used to do a service Saturday where I could accommodate like 25 teens and we would like sharpen all the pencils. We would, test all the markers, like little stuff like that. Um, yeah, so I definitely think there are ways to get more hours in, especially for like the desperate kids that are like, I just need to come in and do a thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Well, we have 4 people. I love that this kept going who are asking for your blog in computers and libraries. And as you described that, I feel like I might have read it because we subscribe to that for the state. So, but yeah, it's very funny, you guys. I see you all. So folks really want that. Let me go. Oh, and then someone said, what is the volunteer aspect of the slime? Like for one of your earlier slides, like how is that a volunteer thing? Are they helping the younger kids make the slime or is something else happening?
Yeah, so we sort of have this expectation of our children's librarians that they will have teen volunteers at all of their programs. And sometimes that is 2, and sometimes it is 10 or 12, depending on the program. And so they check kids in, they pass things out, they help set up the room, clean up the room. And there might be times where you're doing stuff where they're literally just standing in the back waiting to see if anyone needs help.
Mhm.
So when we do, like, we're gonna do a slime program for elementary kids, we'd have the team volunteers helping them make the slime. Maybe like we'll have one kid that's on like glitter, one kid that's on, the saline solution. And then at the end of the program, we allot enough time and materials that once the kids are gone, they can make their own slime. Also sometimes we might do it in the beginning where we're like, okay, we're doing this craft, make examples for the kids to see. And they're like on it. I would love to make this craft in a way that they would never have that same enthusiasm if they came to a library program to make that craft, but they're still having so much fun and sort of connecting with their inner child. So yeah, that's what I mean by like volunteers that do slime. They're not just like
Cool.
they're not like a slime factory.
Okay, and y'all are very funny. There's so many questions. Okay, so I'm gonna pop back over to the other one in the Q&A. Any particular programs that got buy-in from lower attention span kids, especially ones that keep getting in trouble because they're bored slash seeking attention. I think sort of paying an homage to that slide that you had up, perfectly normal behavior for teens, for the adults who apparently were never teenagers themselves or something.
Yeah, so I have 2 thoughts on that. The first one is we have found that, and this might sound bonkers, but the more teams you have, the more likely you are to have like some superstars that sort of just like even out everyone else. And so a lot of times I think that people shy away from, they're like, oh, the teens have been so like I've gotten burned by some like crazy team volunteers. I'm going to only request 2. If you only get 2 team volunteers and one of them's a dud, you're gonna feel like, oh my gosh, so like a huge percentage of them are just so out to lunch. If you have 10 and 5 are rock stars, the other 5 are just sort of kind of like going to be buoyed by them. And they're going to have teens that are like so on it, getting praise, like really connecting with their community. And the hope is that that will actually like inspire them and sort of like pull everyone up a little bit. So I think like it's kind of counterintuitive, but I think like if you feel like you are having some behavior problems, especially in the realm of sort of like harmless kid behaviors that are just hard to manage sometimes, more teen volunteers, pairing up veteran teen volunteers with newbies, that sort of thing. And then the other thing, I'll sort of circle back to this idea of like low stakes things. So like, um, I've had instances where there's been a kid who just like can't stop talking during a children's program. It's really distracting. And we'll be like, okay, we're gonna like pull you to do something else. Can you like do this task for me that is like different than being in the program? And again, maybe it's low stakes, maybe it's coloring bookmarks, cutting something out, just sort of giving them an activity where they can feel successful so that it's not just like them coming to the library and feeling like they're always doing the wrong thing, if that makes sense.
Mm, makes perfect sense. Are your high-low books separated out or mixed in with the rest of the collection?
They used to be mixed in. Now they're separate. I have a sign that some of you might have gotten an email from me because I went on this like, what do I call this section? Because I just feel like we know what high-low is, but other people don't. And I just like calling them low reading level is just never going to want anyone to pick them up. So I think my sign says high interest titles. And I believe it says just like, are you like short on time? Are you working on your reading skills? Do you want something quick or something like that? Um, or like maybe like it's tough for you to get through a longer book or something,
Mhm.
check out our high interest titles. And so they have their own shelf, they have their own little front facing, and they've done pretty well. And I will say, way more high-low books about sports are published for high school or like high school boys. Where reading's never gendered, but we all know what I mean. Than there are in like general population YA books, I feel. So like if you're looking for literally like a very straightforward sports book that is going to appeal to a reluctant reader, there are so many more options in high-low publishing than in like commercial publishing.
You are correct. And we just had a request. Would you mind adding your sign to the slides? Awesome. Or the tote bag, however it's easier for you
Absolutely.
to do that. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, and this question was in my head too. So I'm not surprised someone asked it. Do you label your middle grade books like in the teen section as middle school, i.e. stickers, marker? You're saying no. How can they find them on the shelves? Is that, do you help? Do they just go in there and pull stuff like anyone else?
Yeah, so I think like if you think about at least in our library, I kind of equate it to our chapter book section. Our chapter book section in our children's room really serves like potentially like third graders to maybe seventh graders. And the book that is for a third grader, very different than a book that is for a seventh grader. But we have them all in the chapter book section. It is a similar philosophy in teen where we just have books for middle schoolers and high schoolers. And there are tools that we have to help them find the books that they need. And a lot of times it's the cover art, they sort of get the vibe of what's for them. Sometimes it is they start reading it and they're like, ugh, not for me. Um, sometimes it is just like having a librarian pull books for them. Um, and then again, at the end of the day, there's nothing that stops a middle schooler from picking up an older teen book, but that's also true all the time, regardless of where the books are in the library, right? We do not police that sort of level of looking at books, checking out books, etc. So I think sometimes I have gotten that question from my colleagues, and some people have, there's varying levels of comfort with that sort of philosophy. But I have not had many issues. I also feel like if at any point an adult comes to me and is like, what is the target audience for this book? I can very quickly get that information from our catalog. I can get the publisher's recommended age range. I can pull up reviews. And that's also part of our philosophy of the book smorgasbord is that we never, unless they want a specific title, we rarely ever hand them one book because we don't necessarily know what is for them. So we hand them an array and they choose what's right for them. And I feel like the library is just that on a larger scale.
Absolutely. The clock. It's working against us. Okay, so space is an issue for the person who submitted this question. Their YA room is small. So I think sort of when thinking about this in this entire collection conversation, what's it like for you at your library? And I imagine there are a lot of folks here who have small YA sections and would love to hear your thoughts on managing that.
Yeah, so I feel fairly fortunate in the sense that like I do have a decent amount of shelving, but I also have a decent budget, and so I weed very aggressively. I every year I look, I'm not saying I weed this all, but every year I look at things that have not gone out in 2 years.
Mhm.
And I weed very, very aggressively. I think that I think a tighter teen collection means it's going to circulate better. And so having space constraints is really stressful. But I also think that um, if we are only collecting to the size of the shelf, that's not collection development, that is interior decorating. And so I think really thinking strategically about like, do I need all these books on my shelf? And can be so hard to weed a book that I bought 3 years ago that no one checked out that I thought looked amazing, but I do it because it's going to make my collection better. And I will say, um, I send those books to my high school libraries. I have a really great relationship. We can put them in interlibrary delivery. I weed I weed the books. Anything that's in good condition that's only a couple of years old, I delete, black out the barcode, and then I send them to the school, one of my high schools, typically. And she has library interns that process them and add them to her collection. So that I
Mhm.
think eases the sting.
Absolutely. Some people love aggressive weeding. Let's see if it's possible to get one. No, not really. It's 3:45, and that's kind of it. If there were other questions that you all wanted to ask Alyssa, I'm sure it would be fine to send her an
Absolutely.
email. I'm probably gonna send Alyssa an email. We will get all of this stuff that was mentioned into the tote bag. Bookmark that. It is a living document. It's not going anywhere. Please, we also ask if folks can take the survey. That's how we ended up with these people, like with these folks. We actually do read these and then we like make the suggestions that folks ask for. So please take that. We schedule like a whole meeting to go through those. Thank you again to Hachette. Go in that tote bag, get those books, read them. I'm a big ebook reader. Everyone is saying thank you. I will be calling you, Alyssa. I've got separate questions. But thank you, everyone. I hope your Friday was great with us at Teen Summit. I hope everyone has an amazing weekend. Aggressively weed on Monday and just like dive into this lovely world of middle school and books and librarianship. I love this. I love us. And we can't wait to do this again with you all next year.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I'm happy to hang out for a sec. If anyone has any other burning questions, I'm gonna just read through the chat real quick.
Okay,
But thank you all so much.
awesome. Well,